What we're going to talk about today is how to reduce costs and improve safety. It's going to be 5 simple steps that you can use to standardize your anti-fatigue mat approach. My name is Russell Herbert, account manager here at Acromat. Been here about 15 years, so love what I do and excited to have you back with us today. I just wanted to start with something I think is important to keep in mind, that you can standardize with any mat manufacturer or supplier. So, well, we'd love to be that partner for you, and that's our ultimate goal. But what today is about is to show you how you can take this approach to ultimately improve the health and safety and productivity of your workforce, all the while reducing your costs. To set the stage, we polled over 75 of today's webinar registrants with a few questions and about the challenges that you might have with your current anti-fatigue mats and how you use those. The first question we asked here was, what are your main obstacles related to anti-fatigue mats? And here's the top 4 responses that we got from that question. So as you can see, we're looking at a high percentage, 40%, that are experiencing the problem of the trip hazards from stacking rectangular mats. And we've got the 37% durability, we got 13% on lack of ergonomic support, and then 10% on number 4 there, the time consuming internet searches. So as a custom mat manufacturer, number 1 really resonates with us. And the second point there about how the durability on the types of mats that you're using, those are really important questions that we want to try and get our arms around as we work on this whole process of standardizing. So the answers to those questions, the next 2 slides will really speak to why we felt that standardization was a good topic for today's webinar. If you notice on that second question there, how many different brands do you use in the facility at the moment? Those last two pieces there, the 10 plus or the unsure, that's nearly 60% of the audience that are either not sure how many mats they're using or they're using 10 plus. So that's what we're going to talk about today. How can we bring this down to something much more easy to manage, much more standardized? The next question that we asked, if you have a formal anti-fatigue mat strategy in place or a standard right now, and then we followed that one up with, do you have a standard in place for other safety products and PPE? That may be, cut resistant gloves, it may be footwear, it may be eyeglasses, whatever those types of products are that you may have a standard on already. And I think the interesting thing here is only 13% said that you do have a standard for anti-fatigue mats, but nearly 80% said that you do have a standard for other safety products. So it shows there's a huge opportunity here that we can kind of close that gap and take what you've already learned from standardizing another product, another safety initiative, the benefits that you've experienced from that, and apply that to what we're talking about today on your anti-fatigue mats. So standardization is really the means of unifying your anti-fatigue mat strategy across your facility or your organization. And by going through this process, we're really going to be able to pinpoint any challenges you might have that are maybe going unaddressed right now. You're going to identify what types of mats are actually needed in your facility. Ideally, bring that down to a single manufacturer or supplier, just to pull it all together so you're not having multiple channels. And then formalizing that and communicating it in a way that is easy to follow, and everybody on your team is able to understand what the mat strategy is. And one thing that I think is really crucial with this, and especially in today's environment, there's a lot of turnover, there's a lot of change happening in the job market, and this approach ensures consistency. So as you have changeover, new people come on board, you're doing the onboarding for new engineers or new safety folks, whatever it might be, you now have a standard that you can point them to, so they don't have to kind of go out and do all their own research again and again. So it keeps it consistent. You ensure that you're having that level of safety that you're requiring, and you're also helping those new people on without having to put them through all that extra work again. So you can see here there's a template and just simple before and after picture of really what we're talking about, how you can bring that together and really improve the safety in your facility. So it's not uncommon what we found for facilities to allow many different people to be involved in purchasing mats, and that's great. You know, there's manufacturing engineers, there's continuous improvement champions, safety leads, production supervisors, and on the list goes. And without a coordinated approach, what tends to happen is it can lead to a lot of differences from one work area to the next. And then over time, that causes a lot of safety and quality issues. What you see here in these photos, that was from a facility we recently did a site assessment at, because they were on this path of trying to standardize. And there's 12 different types of mats in use in this facility. And as you can see, they're constantly being moved and changed and mixed up with each other. So you get those trip hazards from stacking rectangular mats or trying to piece them together. That goes back to the first issue on the poll that we showed earlier. And then the durability issues, obviously, which was number 2 in the poll. You can see some of those are getting pretty beat up in the areas. And then the ergonomic issues that come from having inconsistent surfaces, you know, gaps in the work areas, things like that. And then obviously the time that it would take for people to do the research and bring in this many different types of mats. So that's a very typical example of what we see when we start on the process of standardizing. Somebody needs a mat and they go out and search for one and they buy it and install it, and you know, they move on to the next line, or somebody else does the next line, and they go and do their own thing. And over multiple years, it leads to kind of what you see here. So today, this facility was able to bring this down to 2 different mat types, addressing all of the different areas in their facility, got all the features and options identified. And so when the needs come up, it's very quick and easy and clear as to what mat is going to go where and what the options are going to be when they get those in. So that's eliminated a lot of the challenges that we saw in the poll results. It takes away, you know, that time-consuming product search. It takes away the trouble of having to stack mats together or butt them up like you see in these pictures, and really enhances the whole process for this particular facility. And another quick note I just wanted to make on standardizing, as everyone would be well aware, I'm not a lean expert by any means, and many of you on here today would be far better at explaining this than I am. But just to share that standardizing is one of the 5 principles of lean. And we actually had a client just share some of his feedback about that. Adam Arnold, thank you for that, Adam Dakin. Just wanted to say how well your mats do for us from a lean 5S standpoint: sort, straighten, shine, standardize, and sustain. So you can really see how this can actually help all the way through that process as well. So let's jump into now kind of how now we know what it is and why we should do it. We're going to jump in now to kind of the steps you can take on how to do it. Step number 1 is to conduct a facility assessment. Kind of got to get out there and just see what's going on to start with. And things that you're looking for here would be, you know, are there trip hazards? Are there areas that are in need of new mats? Are there areas that maybe don't have mats at all or need to bring in some mats for the first time? And then you'll also want to look at grouping together the similar departments. So we've got a few examples here on the screen. You've probably got many more that you can think of in your facility as well. Just group them together into similar environments, and that will really help as you build that standard, just understanding what all the different areas of your facility are. And then whilst you're doing this process as well, and especially whilst you're out there in the facility, start thinking about what options you're going to need. For example, do you think you'll have any areas that drainage might be required? Do you want to have yellow borders on everything or some things, or just in certain areas? Are there going to be needs for non-slip coatings on the back? Do you want just standard mats, or do you have a need for some custom shapes and sizes as well? Just all those questions should be sort of in mind as you're doing the assessment. And what we find, one of the very valuable questions to ask whilst you're doing these, just simply ask the operators in the area. A powerful question is just say, what, if anything, would you change about the mat you're working on? And just leave it there, and you'll be surprised at how fast you get the feedback from these operators. I've done it hundreds of times, and you always get really great feedback. It could be, this mat is great, I just wish it was a little bit longer this way. Or this mat is great, I just wish it didn't go over here as far because it gets in the way of my cart. Whatever it might be, you'll get that feedback right away. You can document that, and then that will really help you as you start pulling that together. What you see here on the screen is our inspection checklist that we use and is available for you to use as well. We'll share this with you after the webinar, but next webinar in June, we're actually going to do a step-by-step walkthrough of this document in detail and kind of address how to conduct that facility assessment. Don't have time to go into it today, so we'll actually do a whole separate session on that next time. So step number 2 after you've done your assessment is now to bring that back and select what mat types are needed for each environment. So whether it's Acromats mats or mats available with your current provider, or mats from a provider that you're considering moving to, step 2 is all about honing and documenting the list of specific mats you need for each environment. So for example, do you need diamond plate somewhere? Do you need a smooth surface? Do you need clean room certified mats? Do you need mats that are ESD safe? Do you need mats that are antimicrobial? Do you have a requirement that is chemical resistant? And just kind of start narrowing all that down and understanding exactly what all the requirements are. What you see here is 4 of our most popular and versatile styles of mats, just to touch on and give you some examples and some ideas. So for example, the 101, that's by far our most versatile mat, used in a lot of different environments, from warehouse to production to packing, and on it goes. The clean room obviously is more specific for those controlled use or clean room environments. Same with the ESD, if you have the need for a static dissipation, that's that one. And then the NitriTough, something a little more heavy duty, maybe where abrasion is a bit more common or something like that. So just to give you some ideas on how you want to start thinking about in this step, and start narrowing down what are all the actual mat types that you need here. And combined with step number 2, step 3 is then selecting the features that you need. So it's important to include this in the process. For example, we've already touched on a couple of these, but if you have a complex area with frequent oil and coolant spills, you may want to consider custom shape mat, drainage holes, yellow borders on the entry, for example. The second example would be, let's say you just have standard size 3x5 mats, but you don't want to mix them up by area or by department. They need to stay without getting mixed up. Then perhaps you could opt for some different color options to help separate those different areas and departments. So lots of things to think about here, but just be creative and cover off all of the different options and features that you might need. The other one on here is cable covers. Maybe you have a need for that. And it's just something you can add into the document once you create it, just to remove that question from coming up down the road. And step 4 is where we bring it all together then into what we're calling a standard work instruction document. You may have another name for it, another template, and that's totally fine. This is the one that we've developed and we use, and we'll pass it along after the webinar. If you can use this one, that's great. If you have your own example or template, that's fine too. So one example of the help that a standard provides is under the procedure section here. The first bullet says yellow borders are required on all access points. So that just helps anybody that comes along down the road and needs to design a mat. They don't have to think about that or ask that question. It's documented and they know exactly what's going to be required. And also your provider then has a very clear direction of what they need to quote. It takes out a lot of back and forth. So these simple action steps make sure everyone on the team is following the same standard and keeping the safety consistent with what you've agreed upon throughout the facility. So we'll jump to step 5, which is just think about simple but proactive ways that you can keep improving the standard and communicating that with your team. So communication is a large part of safety, is from my experience, and this really helps in step number 5. You can get it all the way to step 4 and then forget to communicate, and then it really falls apart and nothing really happens. So this is really the key step to make sure that everyone is using it. You can use posters, signs, newsletters. You can share it when onboarding new employees. You can, have it in a shared drive somewhere where your team can access it easily. You can do reminder emails, and keep gathering feedback. That question I shared earlier is really critical when you're working through this, and also even ongoing as you roll this out. You can always ask people, what, if anything, would you change about the anti-fatigue mat you're currently working on? And that helps you to make sure that the document is kept relevant. And it will also help catch, let's say, a new department or a new environment comes up since you've done your standard. And these questions and communication will just help you to keep current. And if the document needs to update, well, then you've got the materials you need to make that change, and then keep on with the communication and feedback. That's really it for the steps on what you can do to standardize. Is uncover the mat styles and features that you need by doing a thorough facility assessment and asking questions, and then you document it, and then you communicate it. So it's really simple, but the approach has worked so well that some of our top clients have chosen to standardize matting throughout their facilities, because they've consistently seen a reduction in trip hazards, injuries, improvement in productivity from their staff, and far happier employees. And all the while, you're actually reducing your year-over-year cost of anti-fatigue matting because you have that consistent standard. So with that, we're going to jump on to questions. If anybody has questions, feel free to put those in the chat, and we'll jump through some of those for a second. We do have a question here. Josh is asking, if we standardize, do we have to do everything right away or at the same time? Is this a sort of once and done deal? How long will it take me to do? And to answer that question, Josh, is we would say the standardized document that we're going to create here is kind of a line in the sand. So we're not saying you got to just rip everything out and change overnight, but what we are saying is from here on out, everything that we're going to bring into the facility is going to be up to this standard. So you may have some mats that don't actually meet this criteria, but they still have some life left in them, and you want to keep them in place. They're not posing any safety hazard for now, and you just want to wait until that lifespan is used up and then bring in your new one. So that's really how long it will take. Really that depends, but that's kind of the answer to that question, is treat it as a line in the sand. Anything new from here on out, we want to bring in to match this. Tony asks, what is the biggest mat you have? That's a great question, Tony. And I think on our last webinar, we shared the mat you see here in the picture actually was 550 square feet. There isn't really a limit on the length and width, so we can go as big as we want. Logistics is usually the bigger issue. We actually are just working on an opportunity at the moment that is close to 7,000 square feet. It would be, come in sections and then be put together on site after it's delivered, just due to the sheer size of it. But that kind of gives you a range, I guess, on how big we can go. We always just say it's sky's the limit on the size. So another question comes up here from Carolyn. Do you offer facility assessments? That's a great question. Yes, we do. And we'd love to be a part of that. If that's something that you have questions on or need help with, that's a service we offer at no cost to our clients, to come in and actually help you with this process. We've done it numbers of times, so it just maybe sometimes helps to have somebody who's familiar with it just to point out some of the things you need to look at. So definitely happy to jump in and be a part of those as they come up. It looks like another question just coming in here from Landon. Can these integrate with mats that have safety controls built into them for machine operation? Are there transitions or custom mat heights available to match existing control mats? That's a good question, Landon, and I probably want to look at a little bit more detail on what you're actually asking, because we can customize them to anything you want. So we can do different thicknesses. If there's a, you know, like a ramp or something that you're trying to meet, we can figure that out. As far as the safety controls, I'm kind of assuming you mean like a pressure sensitive mat where it shuts off the machine when you step on it. These ones are just anti-fatigue, so they'd normally go around those areas rather than being a part of that itself. But those are great questions and things that, as we help you with site assessments and actually being on site with you to address those questions, we can definitely come up with some creative solutions, because we've done very similar things to that before. So another question from Tony: are they oil resistant? They certainly are. The 101 is an oil resistant mat. It is nitrile, so completely impervious to liquids and oils, and that's how we can put the drainage holes in them too. So great question. Looks like a question from Sarah here. Let's read it out. We're currently in the process of standardizing the work areas at our 8 machines and have been trying to decide if a longer custom mat makes more sense than 2 or 3 smaller mats in key areas. We have short catwalks that get moved frequently, would need to be placed on the mat if we went with one large custom one, if that factors in at all. That's a great question, Sarah, and I appreciate you sharing that. First of all, great job on working through this process of standardizing. I know it can be daunting, so kudos to you on that one. As far as what makes sense on the particular mat, I would love to maybe get with you offline on assessing that particular area. There's not really a right or wrong answer here. It depends on the catwalks you're talking about. I'd like to understand that a little bit more. Obviously, something on top of a mat usually isn't a very great option or very safe. So I don't know that I can fully answer the question right here without knowing all the ins and outs of the area you're working on, but would love to be able to help you with that offline. And those really are great examples of the kinds of things you want to consider and then document into this document as you pull it together.